Hey, my friend sent me an idea about a mediator app built on Google
Hmm.
Nest.
Oh,
So,
so that is a little voice skill where kids take turns and the device guides them like that? Or is it something different?
yeah, it's something like that. I was thinking two kids argue, and then the mom or the kid say, "Hey Google, start mediator," or some other catchy
Hmm.
phrase, and then they will first. I want to make sure that it teaches them problem solving skill, empathy, conflict resolution skill, communication skill, and so we
Right.
need to build all of that in. I'm thinking that the kids should say, oh, each kid say what
Hmm.
they want, and then
Right.
you or the skill uses natural language to affirm what they are
Hmm.
saying to make them feel like heard and understood.
Right.
And then, and before when it starts, it needs to lay some very quick ground rule, be respectful,
Yeah.
honest, loving, and no interruption when the other person is speaking, and
Yeah.
listen to them. Just very short phrases at the very beginning to lay some ground rules. So, kind of like that.
Let me just think about that. So the teaching part here is it's not just about solving today's fight, it's about teaching them a habit. So eventually they don't need the tool anymore. That kind of thing.
Exactly. So use a fight as a teaching moment to teach them real world skill to handle conflict resolution for the future. Make it a habit as they
Yeah.
grow up.
I think that's a really strong emphasis for it. So the tool can set a really calm environment, set those ground rules, simple and quick, super short phrases, be respectful, be honest, no interruptions, that kind of thing. Just enough structure so they know what's expected. And then each child takes a turn and says what happened, what they feel, and what they actually want. So
Exactly.
instead of just parroting back, the AI would ideally say something like, sounds like you felt left out when that happened,
Mm,
that kind of thing. And then the other child has to summarize, gets them to actively listen before defending their own side. That, I think, flips the whole vibe.
well, I don't want the child to summarize just yet. So, first, the skill or the ability should be the one summarizing. It should be out.
Right.
So then
Gotcha.
the other child can listen in and say it is saying the same thing, and making sure that that person know that that person is understood. Because some people in conflict, they would listen, but they would be formulating their own response instead of actually listening and understanding
Yeah.
where that person is coming from.
Right. So the AI does the first reflection so that the kid feels heard without the instant pressure of the other kid's interpretation. That makes sense. So
Yes.
that lowers defensiveness and models what active listening even sounds like. And then once they've seen it, the next round, they practice doing it and then maybe earn a point for getting it right.
Right. So I do want it to be a community point. Oh, so the whole goal is to not have conflicts. So the parent,
Right.
maybe the parent can add a point each day or 5 point each day for no conflict. And when there is conflict, if the child demonstrate active listening skills and
Hmm.
skills, they can build up their reward towards a family dinner or something that the family decides to do. Or probably not, it's not wise for the family to decide it, but the parent, they might have a goal for the family, something that they know the kids will
Right.
like, and then they work towards that point system, towards that goal. So it can be
Right. Okay.
collaborative and not competitive. Also, I'm thinking, go on. I lost my train of thought.
No problem at all. I really like that pivot to teamwork because otherwise you're gamifying the conflict itself, and that's not helpful. So maybe instead of points per child, it's like family harmony points.
I like that
If
name.
if both kids demonstrate active listening in a day, the family bank goes up. And then you can celebrate together. Choose a movie night or vote on dinner or pick a board game. That way, it's not about who did better. It's that we did good.
I think that's good. And so I think we have it down. I think also after the skill or the ability summarizes, then the kid confirm, then we should ask the other kid to say that, oh, I think that you are feeling this because you said this, or
Right,
somehow to mimic the model so that they can put into practice. And then after
right.
that, they can work on brainstorming the problem, thinking of
Hmm.
ways that they can solve the problem together,
Yeah,
or how to prevent future conflict like this happen to from happening. And then they
yeah,
get points for successfully resolving the conflict or not. And then if they can't find a solution, then the skill or the ability can help. I'm going to say AI from now on. I think AI,
right.
LLM is going to be needed for this. The AI is going to brainstorm with them and help them along.
Yeah. That honestly is a really strong learning loop. I think what you're describing is gradual fading out of the AI over time. So, first the AI models empathy, then the kids practice short versions, then the AI just coaches the kids on their attempt and eventually stands back. So, the children own the whole process.
Well,
And that
I
ending on prevention.
sorry for interrupting. I think the first thing is for them to brainstorm their own solutions. I
Mhm.
want them to brainstorm first, and then the AI come in when the brainstorming, when they're hitting a roadblock, because idea generation, it's easier with AI help, I think. And so help the, and yes, eventually it will phase out, but I'm saying all of this is one coaching session because all these skills are needed in order for a problem to be solved from A to Z.
That's an important distinction. So it's not AI led, it's AI coached.
Yes, AI
Yeah.
assists. Hmm.
So the kids, exactly. So the kids have to generate that first solution. Each one has to suggest at least one thing. And then the AI only steps in after that first round to offer up extra options if they're stuck. And that way, the habit of problem solving stays with the kids, but there is that safety net if they need it.
Exactly.
And
Right.
then, great. And then there is the prevention right at the end. I think that's really powerful because it's not just let's stop fighting right now. It's okay, what can we do differently next time? So that teaches the reflection, not just the reaction.
Right. I think for mistakes, it shouldn't be repeated. There should be, you're not going to be perfect, but there should be a way to prevent it in the future. And then if it doesn't work, then the plans change again.
And teaching that as a life skill so young, that is really powerful.
Hmm.
That's super helpful.
So, do we have the whole structure down? Do you have any other questions or things you want to discuss?
Mm.
That's the overall plan for the skill. I'm going to call the ability the skill. It's just easier to me. So, what do you think?
Let me just have a look at that as a whole. I think that's really robust and complete as a teaching sequence. If I were to suggest anything, maybe just a quick emotional check at the start. If a child is too upset to
Mm,
communicate effectively,
mm,
that's not going to be that helpful. So maybe that 1 minute to cool off rather than forcing that mediation. And then maybe that coaching could be adaptive. So
um,
if for a particular family, active listening is always the sticking point, spend more time there. But if it's brainstorming that's tough, lean on that more.
let's put that
Your sequencing.
Let's put the latter one in a to
Mhm.
do. We want to start with an MVP. So the basic core ones are there, but those are great suggestions. I think I want to focus on the timeout thing first because yes, some kids are willing to talk about it right away, but some kids do need a cool down period. And so
No.
ask them, do you want to start it now or would you like to start in 5 minute or 10 minute, and give them that option and put a timer on it so that you can trigger them to come back and actually solve the problem instead of sweeping things under the rug.
Right. Yeah, that's great. I think that's a really strong addition. That keeps it intentional. So the timeout isn't just an escape hatch. So when the time is up, the AI picks up where they left off. So maybe a gentle welcome back. Let's solve this together.
Mm,
And letting them choose the pause
mm.
and for how long teaches self awareness rather than the AI deciding for them.
I do
So if I
I do want to make sure that they can't choose any arbitrary, they can say a day or whatever, but we want them to say, I'll be ready in 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 15
right,
minutes, and that's max. They can't take much longer than that.
right, short, focused breaks with the purpose being to solve the problem. That makes total sense. So I'd make that part of the MVP flow. 3 options to choose and then always return to the solution.
And so, what were your other recommendations? I know I cut you off. Sorry about that.
Let me just check. No, you didn't. We actually have rolled my main structural suggestion into that. The other stuff is the nice to haves for later. So the adaptive coaching, a family reflection at the end. So, what skill helped us today? A debrief. That could reinforce it without adding too much length and maybe tailor the prompts by age. But honestly, for V1, the start of clear ground rules, optional short pause, AI reflect, child practice, brainstorm first, then assist, prevention plan, and family harmony points. That feels complete.
Cool.
Nothing, yes, every step has a teaching purpose.
So then let's go to technology. I have never built any Alexa or Google Nest skill or ability. Where do I start?
1 second. I'd start by treating it as an AI app first and device second, because tying it to just one voice platform early on is so limiting. If it were me, I'd split it into 4 layers. The AI brain, which is the mediation logic, a backend for accounts and points and rewards, then thin voice adapters. One for Google, one for Alexa, maybe a phone app later, and a parent dashboard. And then for the stack, TypeScript with Node on the back end, Postgres for data, a simple web front end in React, or Next for the parents, and then call the LLM via API. But given your background, I'd prototype the whole thing as a web app first, prove the mediation there, and then add voice. Then you're not fighting platform quirks while you're still figuring out what feels best for the family in this situation.
Well, I actually disagree with that because specifically my friend asked for a Google because she has a lot of Google Nests around her house, I guess. And I think the ability to just say, hey, Google, do this in real time is liberating instead of going to the phone, opening a app or a web app. I don't agree with that much.
Well, that's fair. If the whole point is that it's hands-free and immediate, right in the moment, then voice first makes sense. So absolutely go with a Google Nest interface first, but keep your mediation brain separate on your own backend. That gets you the voice first experience without locking your logic into Google specifics, so that if you want to add Alexa later, it'll be a lot easier. That way, Nest just handles the voice in and the voice out, and all the logic lives with you. And I would still build that wait parent panel just for account setup and the points. Let me work through this a second. I think what you're pushing back on is the parent not wanting to open up an app first. But maybe a parent setup page could just be helpful if you need to enter things like names or set the reward that the kids are going to get for points. That might just be easier on a screen. But the whole way through, voice can stay front and center. 95% or more via the Nest. Also, let's just think about the physical experience too. The Nest sits in a shared space, so the AI can explicitly manage turns. Child A, now it's your turn. Thank you. Child B, just listen. And that feels like the coach in the room, which is really powerful. So in short, we can go voice first for Nest. Just keep the brains portable for later.
So I want the brain in a WordPress plugin tied to a WordPress database because I already have a website for that. And I don't want to incur additional costs. I want the MVP to be invite only, open to only people that I give it access. Again, I don't want to incur the API costs for a lot of people. Later on, it might be a subscription thing. But the question is, how do I tie a Nest to a subscription on the web page?
Let me have a think through that. Well, I tell you what, your WordPress setup is actually an asset here. For an invite-only MVP, you just keep everything there. You use the WP plugin as your backend. Store families, points, subscription status in your WP tables. And Nest just calls your plugins secure API endpoints. So for subscriptions, don't try to tie it to Nest. Tie it to your site. WP is the source of truth on whether a family is active or not. Then when someone says, hey, Google, start Peace Builder, Google identifies the account, your backend checks that against your database and either starts the mediation or says, that family isn't enrolled, visit the site. So for MVP, just have an invited flag and flip it on for your friend's family. Then later swap that for subscription active, and that's a really small change. I'd also add an API usage counter per family, even in MVP, just so you can make sure that you're in budget and then you'll know what to charge later.
So you're saying Google Nest, each account has or each Google Nest has an account. And so that account is somehow linked to the WordPress plugin. That's the part I don't understand. Where's the link? How do I link it?
Right. That is a really good question. And the short answer is Google provides the identity. So the flow is on your website, the parent clicks something like link my Google Home.
Mm,
Then Google asks them to sign in and approve. And your WP backend stores that Google account identifier against a WP user.
mm,
So later, when the Nest request hits your backend, it will include that Google identity. So
okay,
you map it to the right family record. It's basically an ID match between Google ID and WP user.
okay.
One note of caution here. Let me just check something. This is the big one. That could be a deal breaker, but better to find out that now. So the next move isn't coding. It's spending a little time checking what Google Home officially supports right now. That's a solid first research task, and it'll save you a lot of time and headache later.
Write that in the to-do for me, please. Let's see. And then let's talk about
One,
money.
no problem. I've popped that into the to-do list. But once we've got that answer, then you can design with a lot more confidence. So after that, we can write the technical design doc for your AI coder, and that would give Cursor everything it needs to start building the MVP in a structured way. So do we look at the money side now?
Actually, no, we already touched upon it. We'll have a limit session for the
Yeah.
MVP. I want a freemium model where maybe people can. Actually, no, I can't do that because then all the costs for the premium model will be on me. So, but add in the 20 session limit, maybe per week, so that even with the invite, that is enforced until I turn it off. I make sure they have subscription. There should be an ability to enter in their own API key on the website if so that they don't have to pay us a subscription and they pay the LM cost directly. We just take a small percentage of it. That's for later. And then what am I missing?
Let me just think through that. I think you've locked in some really good decisions. So, as we've just been saying, we put those into the spec right now. So, invite only beta, a weekly session limit per family with an admin override in WP and usage tracking for every family. For later, you can roadmap subscriptions and that bring your own API key option as a separate plan. I think that is smart because it gives you cost control and flexibility. One more thing I would add, observability. Just enough logging to see sessions started, completed, and token cost per session without storing any sensitive child details. That way you can tune those limits with data. Oh, and privacy and safety posture. Decide early what you store and for how long and how you handle tough moments. If a child mentions harm, for instance. Other than that, you've got the bones here. And this is enough to start shaping that full spec.
Let's talk about that for a moment. The harm part. Is it by law that when a child says something like that, I need to report it to authority, or how does this work? For an invite only, it's just with friends. So, do I need to? What are the legal implications that I should know about this?
And let me check. That's a really important question. And I love that you're asking it now. There isn't a blanket law that automatically makes an AI app a mandatory reporter. Reporting duties usually apply to specific license roles and they vary by jurisdiction. For an MVP, the safest approach is not to position it as therapy at all. You focus on it being a coaching tool for communication, and if something safety related comes up, the AI should pause and encourage talking to a trusted adult, or if there's immediate danger, it could advise contacting local emergency services. Also, minimize what you store and have clear terms. And before you open it up more widely, I think it's wise to chat with a lawyer about children's privacy and your terms of service. That's usually a lot cheaper than fixing things afterwards.
We are
So
sending
for now,
a conversation into an LLM, which is public pretty much. And so we're not going to store any chats or, well, actually, we have to for that duration of the session because we want context for the LM to build off of. And so does that fall under storing sensitive data or and is sending conversation to an L like violate anything?
one sec. That's a crucial question. So first things first, sending data to a model is not the same as storing it, but it's still processing, and that does matter. So anytime you send text to an LLM provider, that provider might retain the data for a period depending on the plan and setting. So pick your provider and settings carefully. And for your own system, do think about minimizing what you store. So use transient session context, delete the transcript after the session, and only keep that non-sensitive metadata like points and durations. And if you don't need names inside the prompt, leave them out. Just use child A and child B. And because you're working with kids, privacy by design is a strong selling point. Not storing transcripts by default is something parents might really appreciate. And keep the AI calls on your backend, and then you control exactly what goes out. I'd frame a principle, collect the minimum, keep it the shortest time possible, and keep parents in control. And again, just before you scale, have a lawyer review that piece. It's a sound investment. For MVP, start lean, privacy first, and adult escalating, rather than building complex compliance machinery on day one.
I still don't understand the processing part. Can you explain more about that?
Sure. Let me take another run at that. Think of it this way. When you talk to the AI, your system has to send the words out so the model can generate a response. That step, the AI seeing and using the text to produce an answer, is processing. Whether the provider keeps a copy afterwards is storage. So processing happens by definition. Storage depends on your choices and the provider's retention policies.
Right, I understand that
That's
part.
why
The part that I don't understand is the processing legal requirements. If I send something to be processed by an LLM, thus making that document public as part of their training program or something like that, how do I opt out of that? How do I say that this is client data? I can't spin up my own LLM.
one sec. That is a sharp question, and you're right to focus on it. With the right API terms, you can avoid your data being used for training. For example, OpenAI's API data isn't used to train models by default unless you opt in. That's very different from consumer chat products. So in your design doc, make it a requirement that any LLM provider we use must have no training on customer data by default or an explicit opt-out. Treat that as a technical requirement, not just a legal fine print. You'll still want to check the provider's docs, but that concern is spot on, and the fix is choosing the right API terms and sticking to the data minimization principle.
I see, so it's in the terms. Can you tell me what's Gemini API terms? Is it by default opt out of training also?
Let me check that. Yes, for the paid Gemini API via Google Cloud with billing enabled, Google says your prompts and responses are not used to train their models.
How about
If you use the unpaid, let me check. OpenAI's API is similar in that it doesn't use customer API data to train its models by default. So I would put that on your requirement list for providers.
is that the only thing that I should watch out for, the API term, if it's training, or is there another setting that I should be aware of that I should look for also?
Let me look. So beyond training, there are a few things that I would check. Data retention, for how long and under what conditions, data processing agreements, security and compliance promises, and where data is stored or processed if you scale internationally. For your app, though, my top priorities would be no training by default, clear retention limits, and a solid DPA. Oh, and one more. Abstract your provider in your code so you can switch later without rewriting everything. That's a really big deal for a startup. Flexibility is key.
Now let's talk about testing. I want a requirement that conversations.
I'm sorry, but you've reached your daily GPT Live 1 limit for today. You can continue with GPT Live 1 Mini.
Can we continue with GPT Mini?
Hang on a sec. Sure, picking up where we left off. For testing the MVP, I treat testing as a first-class feature, not an afterthought. Start with unit tests for points, session limits, and invite-only flags. Then conversation flow tests for the mediation steps, including timeout branches and edge cases. Then later, integration tests for WordPress login, secure API calls, and usage counters. And then for the LLM behavior, don't assert exact wording, assert the requirements, like AI summarizes, doesn't take sides. And once you add voice, test turn-taking, and interruptions. And honestly, build a golden conversation suite, a set of 20 to 50 sample family conflicts you can replay whenever you tweak prompts so that changes don't accidentally change the coaching. And make the mediation flow configurable instead of hard prompts. That'll make testing easier and let you add or reorder steps later.
Perfect. Let's see. I'll also probably add edge cases. What do AI need to pick up when the kids actually melt down? Then it will ask for parental help. When kids start cussing or things like that, but that can be later. The cussing can be later. I don't think my friend has that problem. Maybe when the kids start to ramble or doesn't say it, what other cases where, and how do we stop hallucination? How do we stop, what other cases should we test, because this is an AI empowered program?
I think you're on the right line. So I would create a separate edge cases test suite. So include emotional overload cases like crying, yelling, or refusing to answer. And in those cases, just gracefully escalate to something like, this doesn't seem productive, let's bring in a parent. Add off-topic chatter handling, like talking about Minecraft mid-session, and gently steer back to the problem. And handle super short or vague replies by asking one or two concrete questions. For contradictory accounts between kids, stay neutral, don't decide who's right, help explore perspectives instead. Hallucination prevention is more about guardrails than tests, so never invent facts, always ask before assuming, and never diagnose. Code those rules outside the prompt and have your conversation engine check each reply abides by them. And for safety issues, test that escalation. The AI should step back, encourage a trusted adult or a contact of emergency services if someone is in danger. Test graceful failure too, like LLM timeouts, API rate limits, and network drops. Make sure the session can pick up or fail gracefully. And if it were me, I'd keep those tests pretty modular so you can iterate without breaking everything. Does that level of detail help?
Yes, I also want it baked in whenever a feature is requested in anti-gravity or cursor, then it automatically write a prompt for that. For example, if I'm building it for the edge case, then it automatically write a sample conversation, and so that I can build the test suite as it goes, as I build the feature, and not have to generate the golden conversations at the end. I want a golden conversation, like a full flow, but for modular, like incremental building, I want it generated as the code is being generated, the test is being generated. Did that make sense?
Let me just check. I think that's a very good practice to bake in. Basically, every feature request should have a matching package. Implementation plan, unit tests, conversation test cases, edge case conversations, regression tests, and an acceptance checklist. So when you add a feature like child refuses to answer, the AI produces a sample dialogue plus edge cases and tests right then. And yes, require a prompt section called what could go wrong. The model must brainstorm at least 5 failure modes before writing code. Automate structure.
That sounds good.
Structure it as a template per feature. So when you use cursor or anti-gravity, had it generate requirements, code, unit tests, conversation tests, edge cases, and acceptance nodes, all in one go. That way, tests grow alongside the code, not as a giant task at the end. I would literally make no feature is done until its tests and edge cases exist. That will save you a lot of time later.
Sounds good. Is there anything else that we haven't discussed that you think is important for this project that we should discover to avoid costly mistakes down the road?
I think you've actually covered most of the core features. I think at this point, it's more about qualities like deciding success metrics up front, versioning your prompts, feature flags for easy toggles, and cost controls beyond the weekly limit. And then think about prompt observability so you can debug why something went wrong. Oh, and a human override at all times. So a parent can step in and end things. If you keep the mediation engine, the AI coach behavior, and the platform adapters as separate layers, that gives you a very strong foundation. You can upgrade the coaching, swap LLM providers, or add new platforms without rewriting everything. That gives you a very solid base for growth.
You actually hit on something that I've been doing that I want to bake into the process also, and that is log. I know that we want to keep logging at a minimum, and we probably don't want any user data or the dialogue in the log. However, I want to be able to debug directly from logs, so be able to write enough of it to put it into the LLM, and then, or the anti-gravity to debug problem as I go, to reduce my debugging time for issues. So I would like that baked in also to the project requirements.
I think that's an excellent requirement. I'd put it in the architecture, not just implementation. We can log structured debug events, not conversations. Things like prompt version, workflow stage, guardrails triggered, token counts, latency, that kind of stuff. That'll give you the detail that you need to diagnose without storing the dialogue. Add decision traces so you can see why the system chose a follow-up question versus escalating. And offer a developer replay mode with synthetic or sanitized inputs so you can reproduce bugs. And log levels, so info, warn, error, debug. So you get detail when you need it, but minimal data collection otherwise. That should cut debugging time while staying privacy first.
I would like 2 versions of this. One is for the MVP project, one is for MVP plus future, and another is just a generic anti-gravity or cursor rule list for projects to be structured the way that this project is structured for all of my future projects.
Let me check that. I think that's a great idea. 2 documents. First, an AI family mediation project standard covering vision, workflow, MVP scope versus roadmap, tests, logging, privacy, feature flags, WordPress architecture, Nest integration, and so on. The second, is a universal AI project engineering standard, reusable across any AI project. Architecture first, test-driven AI development, observability, privacy, failure first design, cost management, plus AI collaboration rules. So whenever you ask for a feature, the AI follows the same sequence of assumptions, risks, architecture, tests, docs, acceptance, so that scope creep doesn't sneak into the MVP. Those two docs complement each other. One is your project constitution, and one is your general playbook for future AI builds. That should keep all your projects consistent and save you time as you scale.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Anytime.